Tonight at 10, the man who attacked 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin with a samurai sword is found guilty of murder.
A talented, gentle and bright young man, a much-loved son and brother, brutally murdered simply walking to school.
Body cam footage shows the courage of police officers as they attempted to disarm Marcus Monzo. Also on the programme tonight.
We will go ahead on Tuesday.
The government presses on with cuts to benefits as a rebellion by Labour MPs grows.
The thing is, as things stand, it looks like they'd lose that vote. So will they really press ahead? Plenty expect the plans to be watered down or even shelved in the next few days.
Donald Trump stands by his claim America has obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. And tonight, the CIA says key nuclear facilities were destroyed.
And now Lise Doucette in the Iranian capital, Tehran, where there's enormous relief the bombing has stopped. But great worry, this ceasefire won't last.
Oh, drop shot. I can't run for them anymore.
And Sir Andy Murray on the new generation of tennis talent.
On BBC London, a special investigation exposes balconies on a new estate in East London were designed so badly they posed a risk to life.
Good evening. 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin was a much-loved son and brother, described as talented, gentle and bright. But in April last year, his life was cut brutally short by Marcus Monzo, who's been found guilty at the Old Bailey of murdering him with a samurai sword and of attempting to murder others. Footage released by the police shows the extraordinary bravery of officers who were in grave personal danger, but who gave chase and finally apprehended him. Lucy Manning's report starts with the police chase of Marcus Monzo, and there are distressing scenes from the very beginning.
The moment officers confronted Marcus Monzo brandishing a sword, having just murdered schoolboy Daniel Anjorin, his body lying in the road. Captured on the police's body-worn camera.
Mate, drop that now! Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it! Drop it now!
Pepper spray having no effect.
Drop the sword! Drop the sword!
The day had started in Hainault with Marcus Monzo driving his van into Donato Awule, who was walking to work, then chasing him with his sword. Daniel Anjorin had just waved goodbye to his mum and was walking to school, metres from his home, headphones and rucksack on, when he was attacked from behind.
First in our thoughts today is Daniel Anjorin, a talented, gentle and bright young man, a much-loved son and brother, brutally murdered simply walking to school. What should have been the start of a normal day at the beginning of a promising life. Marcus Monzo set out that morning under the influence of cannabis with a clear intention to kill a number of people.
He just killed that boy. He just killed him.
As an ambulance arrived to treat the schoolboy, the defendant attacked it. They retreated, the paramedic describing it as extremely terrifying.
More units! More units!
There was extraordinary bravery from police officers that day.
Is anybody here who believes in God?
As Monzo shouted, "Is there anybody here who believes in God?"
He's running! He's running!
PC Yasmin Meacham Whitfield led the chase down an alleyway. Monzo jumped out, slashing her with the sword.
Police officer stabbed! Police officer stabbed! Right! Yaz has been stabbed! Sam! Are you okay?
He then burst into the bedroom of Henry de los Rios Polonia and his wife, asking them if they believed in God, slashing Henry, only stopping when their 4-year-old daughter cried. As police again confronted him, Inspector Malloy Campbell used his baton against the sword. His hand was slashed open.
Tourniquet! get a tourniquet for the governor, quick!
Local residents screaming warnings.
Lock your doors! Lock your doors!
Police eventually tasered Monzo and handcuffed him and removed the sword. He later told them his personality switched and one was a professional assassin.
Just sharing my sword.
Monzo had bought the sword a few months before and filmed himself unboxing it, calling it ninja stuff.
Wow.
On the day of the attack, he killed, skinned and tried to eat his own cat.
Wow.
The Spanish-Brazilian national was a conspiracy theorist who believed in a flat earth. His family said he changed after retreats in India and the Amazon, where he drank a hallucinogenic tea. On the day of the attack, he was having a psychotic episode, caused, the jury decided, by his cannabis use. Monzo gave no reaction in court as the verdicts were read out and the judge said he faced a life sentence. Daniel Anjorin's father was also in court, dignified. He also gave no reaction as Monzo was found guilty of murdering his son. Daniel's family said he was a well-loved, loving, hard-working, wonderful child. He left the safety of his house that day to go to school and didn't return home to them. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that he will press ahead with a parliamentary vote on reforms to the welfare system, despite a growing number of Labour MPs threatening to rebel. More than 120 have signalled that they could vote against the measures next week, enough to inflict a defeat on the government. The government says the changes to benefits, including PIP, personal independence payments, would save £5 billion a year by 2030 as it tries to tackle a rising welfare bill. The welfare package as a whole could push an extra 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into relative poverty, according to the government's own impact assessment. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to our political editor, Chris Mason. But first, here's Joe Pike.
As he arrives at yet another summer summit, Keir Starmer is facing some major headaches at home. Labour MPs are split on reforming disability benefits.
Questions to the Prime Minister.
A growing issue post-pandemic, which the government say they're tackling.
£1 billion into tailored employment support, a right to try to help more people back into work, and ending reassessments for the most severely disabled who will never be able to work. Mr. Speaker, we won't walk away and stand by and abandon millions of people trapped in the failing system.
But with growing speculation that the PM could pull the bill ahead of Tuesday's vote, Angela Rayner denied it.
What I can tell him, and I don't need a script, we will go ahead on Tuesday.
Since yesterday, many more Labour MPs have joined the rebellion, even if those involved don't quite see it in those terms.
This isn't a rebellion, this is about us asking the government in terms of pausing and looking at the reform.
How is it not a rebellion?
This isn't a rebellion because we are saying that what's been presented to us as MPs, we don't feel for the people we represent is the right package. So
it sounds like you're a rebel though, Florence Shalomi.
Not at all. All of us who have signed that amendment want the government to listen.
The size and breadth of this Labour rebellion isn't just an issue for Keir Starmer now. This whole row over welfare has revealed a fractious, restive group of MPs who could cause the PM problems whenever he makes a difficult decision.
Back at his international summit,
good afternoon.
Was all this, as some journalists suggested, a question of the PM's judgment?
Is it tough going? Are there plenty of people and noises off? Yes, of course. There always are, there always have been, there always will be. But the important thing is to focus on the change that we want to bring about.
For now, Starmer is standing firm. But in the last month, he's already U-turned twice. Joe Pike, BBC News.
So, Chris, the government is insisting that it'll go ahead, but it could be staring defeat in the face. So what are its options?
The options really are pretty bleak for the Prime Minister, whichever way he looks. And the numbers from his perspective keep getting worse, Reeta. So there's I'm told, another 3 MPs who have signed up to this rebellion that is gathering pace, including a senior Labour MP called Toby Perkins, who actually 10 years ago was the campaign manager for the leadership race that Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, who's trying to get this through, he ran that campaign. So funny old game, politics. So what are the options for the Prime Minister? Well, he could press ahead, as they're currently saying that they will, try to twist enough arms in the next 4 or 5 days. Even if they manage to do that, and that would be a tall order, I think it would leave quite a lot of bad blood within the parliamentary party. Option B would be the middle ground, concessions, but can they find enough concessions that would persuade enough MPs to then be willing to back it? And also, could they draw them up in sufficient detail in a very limited window of time? And then the third option is to pull it, to scrap it, to kick it down the road for a few months, to go back to the drawing board. The problem there, as you were mentioning, is the part of the motivation for the government doing this is to try and save money from the ballooning benefits bill, $5 billion a year by the end of the decade. If you scrap the plans, there's a hole in terms of balancing the books. So not easy, whichever way the Prime Minister looks here. This is an authority-sapping moment where, to be honest, as things stand, for him, it's tails you lose, heads you lose.
Right. Chris, thank you very much. Chris Mason. And Faisal Islam will have more on the row over welfare changes on Newsnight on BBC Two shortly. Faisal.
Yes, Reeta, as you've been hearing, more Labour MPs coming out against the government's welfare reforms. Newsnight can reveal the outline of some of the deals being discussed between the rebels and the government. Is another U-turn on the cards? And what would that mean for Keir Starmer's authority? Join us at 10:30, BBC Two, iPlayer and around the world on BBC News.
Faisal, thank you. NATO leaders have agreed a massive increase in defence spending under pressure from President Trump and under threat from Russia. Meeting at The Hague, member states agreed to raise defence-related spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. The current target for defence is 2%. And Mr. Trump hailed it as a big win for Western civilization. The Allies also reaffirmed their commitment to Article 5. That's the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all, easing fears that America might not protect its European allies. And in a meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky, Mr. Trump didn't rule out sending missiles to Kyiv. But hanging over the whole summit were questions about just how much damage the US has inflicted on Iran's nuclear program. More on that in a moment, but first, Katya Adler reports from The Hague.
Well, Reeta, the most significant summit since the Cold War. That's how NATO's describing it. It is the first time that European countries, including the UK, pledged to spend the same portion of national income on defence as the United States. Donald Trump called that a historic milestone, and he was happy to claim credit for it. Actually, as soon as he left on Air Force One, there was a huge sigh of relief here, Reeta. NATO leaders had been so nervous. Relations between Europe and the United States had been pretty bumpy since Donald Trump returned to the White House. There had been those rows over tariffs and rows over territory like Greenland as well. So the aim here had been to keep this summit short and as sweet and controversy-free as possible, and to get that all-important buy-in, that commitment from the US president to NATO, which they got. It's been dubbed the Trump Summit.
3, 2, 1.
That's the picture we want. Yeah.
He got to stay in the Dutch Royal Palace overnight.
Well, I hope you slept well.
It was great.
Yeah.
But this was the photo NATO allies wanted. The US president shoulder to shoulder with them. They hoped Russia's President Putin was taking this in. There had been worries Iran might overshadow the summit. Mr. Trump did spend a lot of time here defending US bumper-buster bombing, he called it, of key nuclear sites.
If you look at Hiroshima, if you look at Nagasaki, you know, that ended a war too. This ended a war in a different way, but it was so devastating.
But the new head of NATO got the job because he's thought to speak Mr. Trump's favourite language, flattery. He described him as daddy today in the war between Iran and Israel.
And then daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
The fawning and wooing here worked.
Almost every one of them said, thank God for the United States. Without the United States, we couldn't. they couldn't really have NATO.
This known NATO skeptic was won over by the end of the summit.
I left here differently. I left here saying that these people really love their countries. It's not a ripoff, and we're here to help them protect their country. Thank you very much, everybody.
There were clear words of commitment by Donald Trump to NATO right here. That is what the alliance wanted. It really depends on US military support. But Donald Trump is famously unpredictable. Does a commitment today hold for tomorrow?
No one here knows for sure. Mr. Trump was friendlier today towards NATO wannabe member Ukraine. No snide comment about President Zelensky's outfit this time, but also no new US aid package. Just a pledge to push Russia harder to stop the war. And then he was gone, leaving leaders here wondering where to find the cash for defence they'd promised him. Not from new taxes, insisted the Prime Minister.
We have a commitment in our manifesto not to raise taxes on working people, and we will keep to that commitment. But it is right that I reiterate that the first duty of the Prime Minister is to keep the country safe, and that is a duty I take extremely seriously.
Donald Trump clearly felt loved here in The Hague. NATO hopes he's now less likely to turn away from Europeans and their joint security. Katya Adler, BBC News, The Hague.
Well, the director of the CIA has said tonight that there is credible intelligence that Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by last weekend's US airstrikes. It comes off the back of a leaked Pentagon assessment suggesting Iran's program had probably only been set back by a few months. So what do we know about the damage? Gordon Carrera reports.
Since the weekend, we've heard many claims about the damage inflicted on Iran's nuclear program.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
All three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
He dropped 12 30,000-pound bombs on the worst facility and destroyed that program.
And now there's anger from Washington about suggestions the damage was not as significant as has been claimed. An assessment from the Pentagon's own Defense Intelligence Agency was leaked to the US media with the claim that some nuclear equipment was still intact and that the program had only been set back by a few months. America's Defense Secretary said the leaked assessment was only preliminary and low confidence, and President Trump did not seem to offer much more clarity.
Well, the intelligence was very inconclusive. Okay. The intelligence says we don't know. It could have been very severe. That's what the intelligence says. So I guess that's correct. But I think we can take that we don't know. It was very severe. It was obliteration.
The site at Fordo was the key target, and it is too early to be sure what damage has been done here. These new satellite images of the Fordo site show the aftermath of both fresh Israeli attacks on access routes as well as the holes where the US bunker buster bombs burrowed in on the weekend. Now, there is no sign of a collapse, though, of the whole mountain. And the images don't reveal what happened inside and whether the explosions reached the enrichment hall buried deep underground. That means other forms of intelligence will be needed. Seismic detectors, specialist laser sensors, maybe human spies and intercepted communications. Now, these new images, also from yesterday from another site, Isfahan, show damage to tunnel entrances. But crucially, even if these sites were obliterated and put out of action, that's not the same as destroying the overall nuclear program.
The big point, according to the leaks we've had from US intelligence, is that the United States thinks Iran has retained highly enriched uranium. That is a much bigger deal than the exact amount of damage done to a particular enrichment plant at Fordo.
Tonight, the CIA director issued an unusual statement saying the severe damage these bombers inflicted meant it would take years to rebuild the facilities, which isn't saying the whole program will be delayed for years. And working out what Iran might do next and where will now be the spies' top priority. Gordon Carrera, BBC News.
Well, American and Iranian officials are due to meet again next week as the West tries to force Tehran to give up its nuclear ambitions. Our chief international correspondent, Lieu Doucet, has just arrived in the Iranian capital. She's being allowed to report from there on condition that none of her coverage is used on the BBC's Persian service, which broadcasts to the people of Iran. This law from the authorities applies to all international media agencies operating in Iran. Lisa, after the events of the last 2 weeks, how likely are Iranians to concede on their nuclear programme?
Well, Reeta, I think we have to wait for confirmation as to whether or not those talks are going to take place next week. Iran's position was always clear that once the bombing stopped, it would return to diplomacy. But it was also equally clear that it was categorical in rejecting the key US demand that Iran reduce its nuclear enrichment to zero. Now, of course, is that now a moot point? President Trump, as is his style, is sending conflicting messages, the latest being he doesn't even think there needs to be an agreement now, because in his words, his strikes blew the nuclear program to kingdom come.
At least you're among the first Western journalists allowed in. Just tell us what you've seen.
Well, Tehran is a huge metropolis, some 10 million people, and on the surface at least, the city seems to be returning to some of its normal rhythms. The traffic is starting to grow, the airports are opening tomorrow, the internet has been restored, even though some social media apps here are always banned. But we're told that some 50% of cafes and shops and government offices are still shut, and many of the people who fled the Israeli strikes for a more safer city still haven't returned, still not completely convinced that this ceasefire will hold. So many people here tell us they were so shaken by the 12 days of Israeli and then American strikes, not just because of the ferocity of the bombing, but because many of them landed close by or on the streets where they live and work. So while everyone understandably expresses enormous relief that the bombing has stopped, they're not sure how long this fragile ceasefire is going to last.
Thank you. Lieu Doucet reporting live there from the Iranian capital, Tehran. In Kenya, police have clashed with demonstrators in Nairobi and other cities as thousands took to the streets in anti-government protests. Officers used tear gas and water cannon to disperse the crowds. 8 people have died and more than 300 people have been injured, some from bullet wounds. Soldiers are guarding key civic buildings and the government has reportedly taken 2 broadcasters off the air. Anne Soy is in Nairobi for us now. And Anne, what are the protests about?
Protesters came out today to commemorate 1 year since they stormed Parliament, protesting at the time against a controversial finance bill, which the government subsequently withdrew and then amended. And they came out also to commemorate the killing of more than 60 people last year during the protests, and to protest also against extrajudicial killings. And therefore, it has shocked many that on the day they came out to protest against these injustices, more than 8 people have been killed.
Anne, thank you very much. Anne Soy reporting there. Now here, vandalism, death threats and relentless noise. Cases of antisocial behaviour have more than doubled in the past 5 years, according to the body that handles complaints from social housing residents in England. The Housing Ombudsman Service says that some councils and housing associations are failing to deal with the issue. Scores of people have contacted the BBC to describe the abuse they've suffered from their neighbours. Tara Welsh reports.
There you go.
She made the lives of her neighbours hell.
Carry on, sunshine.
That's what a judge told Drina Gray when sentencing her to 40 months in prison for criminal damage and harassment.
It's going to kill you. Yeah, go and tell that to the...
Her neighbours told us the impact it was having on them earlier this year.
Because I was so sleep deprived, I couldn't focus on my job. Ultimately, due to so much stress, I lost my job.
Ben says he felt ignored by the authorities and had to record 140 incidents. But today, the court granted a 10-year restraining order with conditions that Drina Gray is not allowed to go within 1 mile of his property.
Finally, we can now go home and relax for the first time in 2 years.
Since we first interviewed Ben, people from around the country have told us they're living in fear.
No, I've had enough of her.
Cheryl, who lives on the south coast, says she's been dealing with antisocial behaviour for 4 years.
I've been personally targeted, harassed, threatened. There's shouting, aggressive. There's music, there's banging, shouting up at my floor. When I'm in, I'm too scared to leave. And when I leave, I get very anxious about coming back. I don't like to go back in, so... it's awful, it's horrible. This is my saviour, this place. I just come down here, sit, it's quiet. It's been that bad that I don't want to be here. I took a suicide attempt on my life.
You've had my family down the south.
Leave me alone.
So what is your trouble?
Leave me alone.
The police, can you come to the door?
We contacted the neighbour who said there hadn't been any problems for a year and that she feels harassed because of Cheryl's cameras.
No. Go.
Police say there have been multiple reports of antisocial behaviour between neighbours. And last year, a civil order was issued to a 61-year-old woman because of a public order offence. The council says it's provided support, which has led to an improved situation. But Cheryl says the problems have continued. And she feels trapped in her own home. Tara Welsh, BBC News.
If you've been affected by issues in this report, details of help and support are available at BBC Action Line. It's emerged that the cyber attack which crippled NHS blood services last year contributed to the death of a patient. The pathology services provider Synovis was the victim of a ransomware gang attack in June. More than 10,000 appointments were cancelled at the 2 worst affected London trusts. Well, our correspondent Jim Reid is here with me. And how did the cyber attack lead to this patient's death, Jim?
Rita, this all goes back almost exactly a year to this major cyber attack on 7 hospitals in London. As you say, the hackers didn't target the hospitals themselves, but this company called Synovis, which provides some testing services, blood tests, some cancer tests, that kind of thing. At the time, a Russian criminal group was blamed for this. It was reported they'd made this £40 million ransom demand, which the organisations involved had refused to pay. Then today we had this statement from King's College Hospital in South London where they confirmed that 1 person had died, at least in part as a result. It appears they had a very long wait for a blood test, which in the hospital's words then contributed to their unexpected death. And then in the last hour or so, we've had a pretty strongly worded statement from the government on this, a spokesman saying, "This tragedy is a reminder of the threat that Russia poses to our day-to-day life and how serious the consequences can be."
Jim, thank you. Jim Reid there. Ahead of the start of Wimbledon next week, Sir Andy Murray has spoken out about the level of social media abuse aimed at athletes. Laura Scott spoke to him.
Second match, Murray. By the time he'd reached the heady heights of winning Wimbledon, Andy Murray had learned to shut out the haters. But he said as a teenager finding his feet, it was difficult to handle the hostility on social media, and praised the British number 2 Katie Boulter for revealing the death threats she receives, putting the issue back in the spotlight.
It's great that she talked about it, and you know, athletes across all sports have been discussing this for a long time, but it hasn't really changed. So hopefully something can get done soon.
As both an ex-player but also a dad, what do you think could be done to prevent this kind of toxic abuse?
Me and my wife are trying to keep our children off social media, until they're much older, because I think it can be pretty damaging. I don't know whose responsibility it is. I don't know if the government needs to do more to tackle it, or Elon Musk and people like that can do more to stop these messages getting through to individuals. Oh, drop shot! I can't run for them anymore.
Murray's now hung up his racket. These youngsters are just picking up their first and tempted him out of retirement to celebrate the refurbishment of 3,000 park courts. One player he's already inspired is Britain's biggest hope for this year's Wimbledon, Jack Draper, who'll be seeded 4th.
British #1.
The highest for a home player since, well, this man in 2017.
Yeah, obviously, be a little bบdifferent for him this year, coming in as a top seed, and but he'll deal with it well. He's played in difficult environments and under pressure before, and I'm sure he'll cope with it well. Well done.
Murray's clear that whether it's on court or online, it's all about creating the right environment for the next generation to thrive. Laura Scott, BBC News.
Scientists have discovered that a small dinosaur, which was wrongly categorised when it was found, is actually a new species. This is the Enigma cursor, which means puzzling runner. It's similar in height and size to a Labrador, and it is tiny in comparison to some of the giants that it used to live alongside, like the Diplodocus. The Enigma cursor will become the first new dinosaur to go on display at the Natural History Museum in London since 2014. Time for a look at the weather now with Thomas Schaffnacker. Thomas.
Rita, thank you. I think Mother Nature is going to be kind to Glastonbury goers. No mud bath is expected this year. Here's the forecast. Definitely mud. Temperatures are expected to rise to about 28 Celsius by Sunday and generally dry weather. Now, this is not picking up the few showers that we might have in the morning, and a weather front you can see here is just to the west of Ireland, and it will be moving through Glastonbury, so perhaps a little bit of rain here and there, but nothing too persistent. Now, we're just missing this big thunderstorm that went earlier on over Paris, so you may have seen it just off the coast of the far southeast of England. Here's the forecast for the early morning. Temperatures typically around about 15 to 17 degrees Celsius. Outbreaks of rain will come and go. I think through the course of the morning, the weather fronts which will be crossing us will eventually move out into the North Sea, and then behind it, the sun will come out and the showers also leave our east coast. Now, it will be a warm day, particularly to the east of the Pennines, East Anglia and the southeast, mid-20s, maybe 26, but a lot fresher here out towards the west with that Atlantic air, that natural air conditioner. Now, here's a look at Friday's weather forecast. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain and breezy conditions across Northern Ireland, some Irish sea coasts, the Western Isles of Scotland, but still up to about 20 or 21, but getting warmer in the southeast. I think this is going to be the start of this next heat wave that looms. In fact, through Saturday, a very warm southwesterly wind spreads across the country. Still a bit of cloud here and cooler weather to the northwest, but look at that, we're pushing 30 Celsius in Norwich and London. And after that, the temperatures are expected to rise even further. So this is the outlook from Friday onwards. Temperatures on Monday, so Wimbledon starts, could be as high as 33 Celsius, maybe even a fraction higher. If that does happen, if it happens, it will be a record-breaking heat for the start of Wimbledon. So yes, another heat wave on the way as these temperatures skyrocket once again. Back to you.
OK, Thomas, thank you very much. And that is tonight's BBC News at 10. The news continues here on BBC One with the news where you are. Bye-bye.